On today's vlog, we're going to be partnering with one of my long-standing partners on this channel, HIPA PARTS. If you've not heard of them, they're a great aftermarket parts group, and they sell quite a bit of parts, carburetor kits. They just sent me a lot of weed eater line, which is awesome, for weed eater line carb kits, fuel filters, oil filters. Just give them a check them out. I got a link to their website in the description below. They also sell on Amazon. A lot of your most popular carb kits on Amazon come from HIPA Parts, just like this GX160 that I have in my hand. So what we're going to do today, though, partnering with them, they wanted a video in their library about winterizing your summer lawn equipment to be put up for the winter. It's that time of year, depending on where you're at, sometime in October, November here in the United States, most of the U.S., it's time to put these bad boys up for about 4 or 5 months, right? Don't need to begin until March, April, May, depending on where you're at. Might need to, just want to store them. And when you store them, you want to do your best to make sure that everything's going to work like it's supposed to come whenever you get it out of winter storage, right? There's a bunch of different ways to do that. I'm going to tell you what I do. What I do is not necessarily the right way. There could be other ways to do this. I will, to the best of my knowledge, tell y'all all of the potential ways that you can winterize your equipment. We will do most of the main equipment that you find. Riding mower, push mower is what we'll start with. Then we will do weed eaters, blowers, and other 2-cycle equipment, or small engine equipment, so to speak. And then I'll touch on the pressure washers as well. So let's go ahead and get talking about the riding mower and the push mower, things that you could do whenever you are putting your machine up for the winter. So I'm going to use this Husqvarna riding mower, this Craftsman push mower as examples for winterizing your equipment. The best thing you can do for these is to find a spot indoors or under some shelter for these things, preferably in like a garage or a lean-to, or if you've got like a temporary shelter or something like I've got back there. You can put them in there. If you keep them out of the elements, that's best. Lawnmower covers work, but they're still being exposed to the cold and to the elements just under a cover. The biggest thing, there's a couple of big things, but one of the things a lot of times is the tires. You want to do your best to protect the tires. If you are storing it outdoors, I would recommend that you put some sort of like brick or block or something so that the tire is not touching the ground. The fluctuations in ground temperature and whatnot really accelerate the dry rot and will reduce the life of your tires if you are not careful. So if you cannot store it inside, or if you're storing it on dirt, I would recommend you put some sort of block or brick or something to keep these tires off of the ground. One other thing that I do want to recommend, and we'll get under the hood here in just a second, is, again, that's the biggest thing. Store it. If you can store it out of the elements, that is the most ideal situation to help preserve the life of everything. Again, if you wanted to go ahead and service it and everything, like oil change and greasing and all that stuff before you put it up for the winter, be my guest. You're more than welcome to do that. And the small engine people will really appreciate you if you do your service either at the end of the season or sometime early, like late winter, like a month before you really start cutting grass. Let me get on this side for y'all because that's where the fuel line is. Some of these parts you can find on HIPA's website, including some of these fuel shutoff switches. So what a lot of people will tell you to do is put some sort of Stabil engine treatment in there, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. What I like to do, and I will also mention, if you do put Stabil or engine treatment in here, don't just put it in there when you shut it off for the season. Put it in there, run the mower for about 5 minutes or so, let that treatment get into the carburetor bowl, because it's got a funnel, if it's like a rear-mounted tank like this, all the way through these fuel lines, through the fuel pump, down into the carburetor, into the bowl. It's going to take a couple minutes for it to penetrate, so make sure you run it for a few minutes after you do that so that you don't have issues. Another option, and this is the option that I do, I'll tell you the downfall, the potential downfall to that, this option, or if you use this. But a lot of times what I do, put an inline shutoff valve, or if you don't have an inline shutoff valve, just get your tank really low, run it completely out of fuel, like completely out of gas. That's what I like to do whenever I'm keeping stuff stored for a while, because you don't have any gas in the lines, you don't have any gas in the tank, you don't have any gas in the carburetor. But if you put fresh gas in it, especially non-ethanol, it'll be fine for just storing for a couple months. But so if you don't want to drain your tank or leave it or get it really empty, you can get a shutoff valve like this. Put it in line, and then if it's parallel like this, the gas is on, perpendicular to the line means the gas is off. And then what I usually do, get it in the line here, turn the gas off, run the engine until it doesn't want to run anymore. What that does is it runs all of the gas out of the carburetor and will keep the carburetor dry for the winter. Again, keeping it out of the cold and out of the elements is good. Some people don't like this method because the seals and the needle in the seat and stuff aren't filled with gas, and some people think if they're exposed to air, then they could dry rot and crack and not work properly. So some people think that the carb seals have issues if you run your machine dry over the winter, and would prefer to put some sort of fuel stabilizer in it. It really honestly is your personal preference. Either way, just don't shut it off for the fall, or shut it off in, October, like you shut it off during the summer, and then wait until March, wait until April to try and crank it again. Do one or the other. One of these, run the tank dry, at the very least run the carb dry, or use some sort of fuel treatment. Same goes for the push mower, except just on a smaller scale. If you can keep it in a garage out of the elements, that's ideal, because on push mowers, they have a lot of cables and whatnot. You don't want to leave them sitting outside in the snow and in the rain. Those cables do not do well sitting out in the elements. At the very least, get it under dry shelter. Again, a lot of these push mowers here, it's hard to put an inline shutoff valve in them. So usually, the tanks are so small, just drain the tank, run it out of fuel. Or at the very least, put fuel stabilizer in them. Again, keep them off the ground so that the ground doesn't evaporate or freeze or whatever and cause issues with the wheels getting stuck or it starting to rot and rust underneath the mower deck. And at the end of the year also, and this goes for both machines, if you're able to, lift up the mowers and look under the mower decks. And we'll do it on the push mower here. And what you want to do, you don't want to have to scrape, you don't want to scrape too hard, but if you have like massive chunks of grass and stuff underneath here, you want to get them out of there, because a lot of times that grass stays wet, especially if you have to cut it wet sometimes in the summer, depending on how much rain you get and whatnot. And so just make sure that your deck is nice and clean when you store it for the winter as well. And real quickly, one other thing I want to mention with riding lawnmowers. What I like to do when mowers sit for a while is I'll at least disconnect the negative, the ground of the battery, so that if there is any current draw, which there should not be in these, it's not drawing any current. The better thing to do is take your battery, take it inside, or at least keep it out of extreme temperatures. So put it in your garage, put it in your closet in your house or something. Something like that will help prolong the life of the battery, keeping it out of extreme temperatures. So, just make sure, again, if your battery is, pushing 4 years old or so, it's probably getting close to being replaced. But I have seen batteries that last 7 years or more when they have been properly stored and properly taken care of in the winter. It's just a couple of bolts and a strap a lot of times. Take it out after you park it for the winter. Put it up. Don't lay it on concrete. Put it in an elevated area that is not on concrete or a hard grounded surface like that. And hopefully it will help prolong the life of your battery. So now that we're done talking about your riding mower and your push mower, we're going to talk about what y'all hear in the background there. 2-cycle equipment, leaf blowers, weed eaters, things along those lines, hedge trimmers. And then finally, in the last piece, we'll talk about pressure washers. All right, let's talk about these 2-cycle equipment. Number one, don't skimp out and get these cheap pieces of 2-cycle equipment. Spend the money, get you an Echo. Don't get a Ryobi. This blower just happened to fall in my lap. But I also want to use it as an example because it's a 4-cycle and this is a 2-cycle. So premise is the same. Honestly, what I do a lot of times, again, the number one thing is to keep these things out of the elements if at all possible. These especially, because these have these thin primer bulbs right here that if they're exposed to bad gas, if they're exposed to extreme temperatures, they love to crack, they love to break. Same thing for these little fuel lines like this as well on here. So if you can keep them out of the elements in some sort of shelter, away from a lot of the extreme temperatures, you're going to be in much better shape than if you did. Also prevent rust issues and stuff like that. So you can do, again, pretty similar to doing the mowers. These are super easy because to drain the gas, all you got to do is take the gas cap off, get your gas can, drain whatever gas is in there, and then what I'd like to do is to run this as much as possible until there's no more gas left in it, to where the primer bulb is either empty or almost empty, to help mitigate the issue of it cracking and stuff on you. So the 2 cycles are kind of the same way. I just run them out of fuel. I've had this Echo bought 12 years ago. At the end of every season, I run it out of fuel. And it's still going strong. I haven't had to replace the fuel lines, the primer bulb, or anything like that. I've always kept it under some sort of shelter, not in the house or anything, but in a garage or basement or a lean-to, and everything's been good with it. So that's what I recommend. Again, you could do the fuel stabilizer thing here, but you know, the caution with the 2 cycles is if you put that in there, I don't know how it's going to interact with the fuel oil mix and stuff like that. So a lot of times I just say drain the gas, run it completely out of fuel, make sure the primer bulb isn't pushing any more gas up in there and it's basically empty, and you know, let it ride for the winter, store it, and you should be good to go. Goes to say, for every machine also, these as well as the mowers, giving them a good cleaning is always a good option as well whenever you put them up for the season, especially if you get a bunch of grass and stuff built up. So you know, you can get dirt and stuff around the 2 cycles, but if you get a bunch of grass and stuff built up around your mowers, what I like to do, I don't like to wash them per se first. What I like to do is get a nice leaf blower, lower the deck all the way, blow as much of that junk out as possible. I recommend doing that every mow, but if you wait until the end of the season, don't leave all that grass and junk sitting on the bottom of your mower deck, because it will not dry and it will get start rusting your mower decks out. So in addition to everything I mentioned before, give them a good, just at least blow them off, and if possible, after you blow them off, give it a good wash and a good clean. Before we finish this video, I will let y'all tell you my thoughts on pressure washers. All right, last but not least, pressure washers. Again, the fuel side of it, basically the same as a push mower. Either run it completely out of gas, shut the gas off if it's equipped like this Honda one with the shut-off valve, or just drain the gas and then pull it and let it run until it doesn't run anymore. You can even pinch the gas line off with a pair of vice grips. I can't guarantee that the fuel line will be pliable in the spring, but anything to keep gas that's untreated out of the carburetor. Now, what I'm thinking on these is, and if you're in an extremely cold climate, as you know, pumps are a big deal with pressure washers and how to preserve them. I personally here in North Carolina have never winterized my pressure washer per se with like a pressure washer antifreeze or anything like that. You can definitely use that if you are going to store your pressure washer in below freezing environments for an extended period of time. So if you live kind of in the north, that's Midwest, then that's very possible for you. Here in my area, I don't necessarily have to do that, but if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with it at all. That is generally the way to go to help ensure that there's no water inside your pressure washer whenever it does get below freezing. There are a couple alternatives to that. One, obviously, again, if you can store it, I know it sounds crazy, if you store it inside or if you store it in a place where you know where there's not going to be any below freezing weather, then you don't have to do the whole antifreeze process with it. The other thing that I like to do to help purge some of the water out of the pump, because it does purge water out of the pump whenever you do, it doesn't hurt to run these things for 30 seconds or so without any water hooked up to them. Whenever you pull on them, after you've used them, if you don't have anything hooked up to them, some pressure washers, or most pressure washers will allow you to run them like this. You're not going to burn the pump up or anything just for running it for 30 seconds or so. But what that does is it shoots all the water that is sitting in the pump out of the pump, and will not let it sit in there for an extended period of time. If it gets below freezing, obviously it'll take some time, but it could freeze, crack the, all the valves and stuff, the pump body if it's bad enough. So that's the one thing you don't want. So you got a couple options here. At the end of the season, if you know that it's going to be kind of in a below freezing environment, but not necessarily for an extended period of time, you can just pull it, run it without anything attached for 30 seconds or so, purge that water out of the pump, shut it down, you're fine. I do it all the time around here on machines and haven't burned a pump up yet because of it. Now, if you're running it for like over a minute without any water attached to it, then that's not good. But just about 30 seconds gets all that water out, and you should be a lot safer if you don't go the antifreeze route. And obviously, also the safe bet is to just put it somewhere where there is never a chance that it's going to get below freezing. Whether it's in your garage, in your basement, in your house. Some people put them in your house too. What I do, it never really gets cold enough. I put my pressure washers in a lean-to. Usually the lean-to never gets below about 40 degrees or so, even on the coldest nights, just because you have that shelter from the cold, I suppose. So that's my thinking on pressure washers. Again, the fail-safe way is to get some antifreeze and put it in there and go through that process. But other ways that have worked for me is just pulling it, let all the water purge out for 30 seconds or so, and then obviously store it inside away from the extreme cold temperatures. I've kept mine in my lean-to, and I've been just fine for 3-4 years going on now that I've had that particular pressure washer. So with all of that, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. Alright guys, so that is everything on this winterizing video, sponsored by HIPA Parts. I want to thank them for letting me do a video for them. And HIPA Parts, or HIPAstore.com. You can also find their stuff on Amazon. A lot of good aftermarket quality stuff. Their support is excellent. Their marketing staff is excellent with Colin and all those other guys that work back there, getting us the parts that we need and showing them that they work, or showing you that they work. So, in terms of winterizing, that's just my thoughts on everything. Again, the number one thing for all of these machines is keep them out of the elements. And at the end of the season, clean them. What you do aside from that, again, the second most important thing is going to be the fuel situation. If you decide to use fuel stabilizer, if you decide to use the fuel shutoff switch, run the tank and the carburetor completely dry, whatever you decide to do, just do something besides nothing is always a good practice, I suppose. Again, the pressure washers could be determinant on how cold it gets in your area, how you store it, and how cold it gets, for an extended period of time, and how you feel about the matter. If you feel like you need to put some antifreeze in there, be my guest. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But there are other ways without having to fully winterize it like that you can get by with it. Thanks again for watching this video. Hopefully y'all found it helpful. Again, in the comments, tell me what y'all do. This isn't a I'm right about everything. I want this to be a video to where somebody can come to it and they can see many recommendations of what has worked for people. So I'm just telling you what's worked for me and what I have seen work for other people, and then let you make the determination depending on the area that you live in, where you store your machines, and how you want to winterize your machines to make the best decision for you. I appreciate y'all watching, and I will catch y'all on the next video. Thanks again to HIPA for sponsoring this video, for partnering with me and other small engine guys here for years going on now. Give them a try if you have not tried their stuff before. Thanks again, I will catch y'all next time.